our topic today is one that is always seems to be kind of top of mind for multiple reasons, but it's one that we here at 10 at the Top have been purposely engaged with now for about 3 years, and that is community safety. Back in 2020, if you might remember, it was right around this time 3 years ago, there was a thing called a pandemic that happened. It was in all the papers. Oh, we don't get papers anymore. It was on the internet in case you missed it. But as if there wasn't enough going on with the pandemic, of course, there was a number of incidents of engagements between law enforcement and the community in ways that nobody was happy to see. And as that was happening, with 10 at the Top, we started having conversations. Our chair at the time was Mayor Terrence Roberts from the city of Anderson, and he and I were talking about, because a lot of nonprofits were signing letters, saying, that we support diversity and inclusion and all these different things, and we said, I don't think we need to, we have all that stuff in our value statements and things like that. What we might have the opportunity to do because of our role as a convener and connector is to actually bring together law enforcement leaders and community leaders to actually start understanding what is the climate and the issues, and here in the Upstate, what can we do as a community to make sure, maybe we can't prevent something like what happened in Minneapolis or Louisville or most recently in Memphis, but hopefully we can make sure that we're having conversations and creating a culture so that if and when those things happen, maybe we can prevent them as a community, or if they happen, that we are all on the same page and able to adapt and deal with it collectively as a community. So we started that with a discovery committee. A number of you were on that group, and they met 4 times in 2020, and what came out of that was really kind of a statement saying that what we want to ensure as an Upstate that we have created or are creating is a culture that values both our law enforcement and our communities, all members of our community, equally. And even more than that, that everybody has a role in creating and maintaining that culture. It isn't just the responsibility of law enforcement, and it isn't just the responsibility of the community. And so we have engaged over the last 3 years in a number of activities designed to help, as we've learned, law enforcement departments and communities that were really, in many cases, already moving forward in those ways. And you'll hear some of that today from Anderson and Greer and some of the other communities, Spartanburg and Greenville, that have been moving in those ways for a long time. But what I have learned over these last 3 years is really that there is a lot of passion both from law enforcement and from our communities to make sure that we do have that kind of a culture. But it is an ongoing thing that we have to all work towards. And I think today's discussion hopefully will be a way of continuing that framework and helping us as we continue to move forward. So among the things we've done is, and I want to especially thank Chief Hamby. We've hosted a number of virtual Beyond the Shield sessions talking about all kinds of different topics related to law enforcement. And what I have been most impressed with is that it is very clear that there are a lot of processes and procedures in place to try to avoid some of the things that we have seen at the national level. And while certainly you can't in the moment avoid some things, there are processes to make sure that those things are incredibly rare and hopefully don't happen within the departments here. And we've also seen that there is a lot of community engagement and interaction through National Night Out. We have supported Fist Bump Fridays with the schools and other things. So there's a lot of good work going on in that field, and we'll talk about some of that today. So as we get started, as I said, everybody's part of the conversation, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. I do want to say, I don't think I have to for this group, you know, I think it goes without saying, but I do want to make sure that, you know, that we set the parameters for today. You know, this is a topic that often has emotion from people. So we want to make sure that we're respectful to everybody and everybody's opinion. You know, there are no bad opinions, you know, and we just want to make sure that as we have this conversation that we understand that, you know, whether we may disagree with something someone may say, that we, you know, understand that they're saying that as, you know, from their perspective and their opinion. And so just wanted to throw that out. As I said, I don't think we have to worry about that with this group, but I know this topic can be very emotional to folks. So before we get started, we're going to go around and have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll finish with our topic leaders, and we'll get started into our conversation. Typically, the way we do this is I ask everybody for their name, organization, and I ask a question. But for the second session in a row, you guys are getting off easy because I want to make sure we get into the conversation. So we're just going to ask for your name and your organization. And then as we have the dialogue and conversation, please feel free to share if you have personal, you know, thoughts or experiences, you know, that fit into the conversation. So we'll go ahead and start, and we'll go around the room.
Joan Pachuta, SC Thrive.
Carrie Silver, USC Upstate Greenwood Campus.
Catherine Hamby, Remax Results, and the Women's Civic League of Anderson.
Mark McKinney with Cintas Corporation.
Craig Sharton with 10 at the top.
Dennis Stewart, List Upstate, South Carolina.
Barring Booker, Greer City Council.
Tiffany Davidson Parker, Universal Therapeutic Services.
Lyle Bridgers with Comporia.
Jewett Tomlin, Urban League of the Upstate.
Marty Elliott, Ready Room Collective.
Cheryl Cromartie, Greenville County Sheriff's Office.
Nathan Hughes, First National Bank.
Jackie Blakely, Tri-County Technical College.
Juana Slade, AMED Health.
Rachel Bentley, Mayflower.
Taylor Shappick, Greer Economic Development.
Anne Marie Shell, Bob Jones University.
Dale Hawley, Greer Citizens Police Academy.
Justin Ehlers, Malden Police Department.
James Madden, Malden Police Department.
Bobby Nelson, Fountain Police Department.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I do want to introduce in the back from our team, we have Justine Allen, who you've been getting emails from, who coordinates everything, and Annalise Abrams, who is our newest staff member. I won't be able to say that much longer. Well, I'll be able to say she's our newest, but not that she's new, because she's been here 2 months now. So she is our communications director. So Michelle, we'll go around and let you guys introduce yourselves, but I want you to frame not just the organization, but maybe a little bit about what your role is as it relates to law enforcement. We'll be able to figure it out pretty easy with these two because of their dress. But for everybody else, if you could just kind of say a little bit about what you do as well as who you are.
Sure. I am Michelle Covington. I'm at USC Upstate. I direct our Greenville campus. And I'm a faculty member in the Criminal Justice Program and the director of our new Upstate Crime Analysis Center. So the Crime Analysis Center is an area where we can have physical or virtual collaboration. We serve both law enforcement agencies and the public. So we collect and use crime data to help in police decision making, to help aid informed decisions, database decisions, looking at patterns of crime, geographical patterns, time patterns, offender patterns, that sort of thing. We also provide training for the public on just a better understanding of how police decision making works and how data can be used for police decision making. So we support local law enforcement agencies who have analysts by providing specialized software and training for them. And we support local law enforcement agencies who don't have an analyst by providing any analytical capacity they might need, whether it's a partnership for regular reporting on what's happening in their area, or a one-time come into the center, work with a piece of software, let's see if we can find this particular person. So that is our role currently, and officially the center opened in September. So that is pretty new, but the work that it's built on has been building for a few years.
Okay.
My name is Matt Hamby. I'm the police chief in the city of Greer. I've spent my entire career at Greer Police Department right out of college. I applied all over the universe, and Greer was the agency who hired me. And I kind of told them I planned to be there a while, and I'm still there 30 years later. So I've had a lot of different roles in our police department, starting with uniform patrol. I've worked in the specialized traffic unit, investigations, operational support, professional standards, and then about almost 6 years ago, the previous chief retired on top of his game, and allowed an opportunity for me to advance and take his position. So I've been there as the chief since 2017. So I'm honored to, I think I have, I don't know about these guys and ladies, but I think I work in the best city in America. So anyway, I'm very honored to be here and also in my capacity in Greer.
Jim Stewart. I serve as the chief in the city of Anderson, and I'm pretty much just going to echo everything Matt just said. I just finished my 10th year as chief with the city, which is kind of an anomaly. Most chiefs only last 6 years. We've seen that. So doing something right. So I enjoy, just like Matt, I started with the city in '91. So this is my 32nd year with the city. I started as a patrolman right out of college, and I know we didn't have many people from college getting in law enforcement back in the day.
But I've served in a variety of capacities, just the same, K-9, patrol sergeant, detective, back to the road as patrol lieutenant, patrol captain. My last stop was jail administrator for our detention center, which I'm so thankful I had that opportunity, because that is a business, running a detention center. And I'm just happy to serve. I'm glad to be part of your group and humbled to be here today.
Good morning, I'm Tim Madsen with the City of Spartanburg Police Department. This morning I represent my chief, Fonzo Thompson. I apologize for not being here. My short bio is very similar to these gentlemen. I started directly out of college. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. My first 19 were with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office, and I transitioned over to the city back in 2017. My role is a bit complicated. I currently serve and wear a bunch of different hats. I'm the captain over the Criminal Investigative Division, but I'm also the captain over Support Services and in charge of the Real-Time Crime Program. So a lot of what Michelle spoke about, and I know we've already visited your office and look to do more about that in the future, but ultimately I bring in technology, artificial intelligence, cell phones, data, numbers, and we kind of create an environment where we can not only assist our citizens, but also the investigators who are working complicated cases. A lot of you have seen the trial that happened in the Low Country with Murdoch's. A lot of that was similar to what we do. When we start to look at where people were, how they moved about in the community, and that's really how law enforcement's moving now. And we deserve, or we expect, the very best from our investigators, because the community deserves it. And our motto at the Spartanburg PD is policing in partnership, and that's how we look to deliver our resources.
Bringing up the rear. I'm Yvonne Davis. I am a civilian with the, I was about to say Greenville County Sheriff's Office, because I see Cheryl sitting over there. I'm in the Greenville Police Department. I've been a civilian working in partnership with law enforcement for 14 years. My role currently is Project Safe Neighborhoods Coordinator. That is a violence reduction model. We use data, but we also want to make sure that we partner with service providers, the community, and law enforcement, that whole piece. So it is a balancing act. You can't have public safety without involving the public. But we also need law enforcement to know that you are a part of the community, not apart from the community. So it's a lot of blending of pieces so that we can go forward. We do use the data so that for the adults it's data driven, but for juveniles we want to be data informed. We don't want to. So as a Black woman working within law enforcement, it's important to me to balance that role, that a system that hasn't always been fair, to communities of color. I welcome this particular model because I thought that it was a very fair way to reduce violence, and I look forward to sharing that.
And we'll get into that in a minute. And I want to kind of start and kind of piggyback on that discussion around the relationship and partnerships between community and law enforcement. Chief Stewart, you all in Anderson really have been working in that model and creating your own efforts for a number of years. Can you talk a little bit about what you all have done, the Dream Team and things there, and why that is important for the police department and for the local community?
So I'm just curious, I want to open it up. Who's heard of the Dream Team? Just show of hands. So I just don't feel like I'm beating a dead horse if I go back so much. But so this was Dr. Thompson with our city council. She had a dream, and that's the reason it's called the Dream Team. That's how we got the name. It's our law enforcement community relations task force. So we meet once a month. Really what we do is pull all the ministers, but particularly the minority ministers within our community. The city feeds everybody lunch, so we got to get some draw to get the ministers in, right? But it started in 2014 as a very small group. We had public forums, and I would say they were very friendly at the get-go. People were asking, tough questions like, why do I get stopped? Why did the police search my car? What's going on? But the more they asked the questions, the more I could articulate why they searched the car. Anyway, so this it's really grew. The very first time we did something as a group within the community was at St. Paul Baptist Church, and I remember I went there as the first one along with 3 of our officers. This was one of our minority churches, not far from City Hall. And so I came in, I sat down right in the middle of all the kids. I think it was Vacation Bible School or something like that. Nobody would talk. Everybody's very standoffish, like they are usually with us in law enforcement. Just sat there. By the end of the day, we'd let them play in the police cars, turn the lights on, the siren on. We did what we call ice cream with a cop, which we do a lot. By the time I left, it was time for us to go because, they had other stuff to do. It wasn't a police day. I had a kid on my leg dragging me, not wanting me to leave. And that's what we wanted to do. So standoffish at first, best friends when we left. So we've done a lot of stuff like that, community ice cream with a cop, hot chocolate with a cop. We've partnered with our local businesses like Starbucks, work there. Anything we do to get out in the community, trunk or treat, we're there, not just churches, but businesses. So now here we are in 2023. I'm going to fast forward real quick and tell you everything. So now we have about 18 ministers that come to our meeting, just like this room right here, like we're in right now. The best benefit of that is kind of like, if you've ever been to a Stephen Covey class, you're writing that check, depositing it, so when something bad happens, you can withdraw. These ministers have my cell phone. Good thing is I have their cell phones. We'll see something, not opposed to the media or anything, but you see a brief glimpse of law enforcement a lot of days just from the media's perspective. And, as law enforcement, we can't comment on investigations. It's just not prudent because we need to save that for a trial in General Sessions Court. But what we will do, and what we have done in Anderson, we'll bring these ministers in, let them see the body camera, not 1 but 5 different angles of the body camera. And then they go back to their churches, word spreads, just like in this room here. You're hearing me and you're going to go back and tell people, and then they're going to tell people. And, it does work. So it's created a very cohesive group for us within the city. So not only have we grown since it started in 2014, not opposed to anything to do with the sheriff's office, and you guys, everybody knows, but we go out in the county now. We're asked to come to like Westside High School, Hannah High School, different churches within the county, and it's not just a city of Anderson thing, it's more Metro Anderson area where we've grown. But I don't want to keep rambling. If y'all have questions, I'll
and if you have questions, we get into it. But Chief Hamby, I want to go to something that you say often on the calls and things that we have, which is, you all have a very serious role and responsibility because you are really the only group who has the ability to take away someone's personal freedom.
Right.
So you often talk very well about how you deal with that responsibility. Can you share that a little bit with the group of just how you guys take that entrusted responsibility and make sure that you're doing it in a fair way?
Absolutely. So it really, for me, the way I look at it is we have, as you just said, we are the only people in our society as law enforcement officers who can remove someone from being free and take them from being a free person and now they're incarcerated. So that is a huge piece of authority that's granted to us because we're charged with the duties of enforcing laws. But with that authority comes tremendous responsibility. I like to start that responsibility in my role at the very beginning of someone's career. So when we're making decisions about hiring people, we have to be extremely careful and very thorough to ensure that we are only hiring people into our agency who will eventually carry that tremendous authority. But I have to make sure that the standards and the values that we have as an agency in Greer match what the intentions are or the heart of that person who is a candidate to be employed with us. So we have a tremendously difficult, I'll just call it difficult, process to even be hired at Greer Police Department, and I'm sure the other agencies represented here today will be very similar to us, but it would take me probably 5 or 10 minutes just to explain the hiring process. But basically, if you've ever done anything that you're ashamed of in your life, there's a good chance we're going to figure it out. And so it's not that we're looking for perfect people. There is no such thing. We're all imperfect, and I'm definitely one of the most imperfect people around. But what's in your heart? Why are you getting into this field? What is your motivation? What is your goal? So it all starts there. And then, once someone becomes part of our team, we have to make sure that we provide the best training, and not just the initial training of how to be a police officer, but it's not just how to do this or how to do that. I know all of our processes, but also the values that our agency represents, the character of our the internal culture that we establish at our police department. But we have to have a really good set of policies that are current with modern trends in policing. And then I think when people come on to our agency and begin working, they realize, they'll look around and they'll see, look, I have to get out there and get out of my car, interact with the community. The goal is for the community to work with us and believe in us. And the only way they can do that is if we know each other. There has to be some effort, or a lot of effort, that we put in to interact with our community and establish that trust. Because if we lose that trust, we can no longer function as an agency. We're done. We have to have the support and the understanding and the trust of our community, because we have to go in to certain situations which often are not pretty scenarios, and we have to take action. Sometimes removing someone's freedom, and if we have a neighborhood who's got someone wreaking havoc on that neighborhood, and that is the focal problem of that neighborhood. If the neighbors that live there know what we're doing, they trust us, they believe in us, they will totally support us for being, surgically intense with removing that person from that neighborhood and putting them, charging them appropriately. So, we look at this as sort of like a partnership, and we literally believe that partnership exists with the community and then the professional law enforcement officers.
Great. So Tim, I want to, you have a little different role with the investigation side. So, we have the belief in this country that it is we're innocent until proven guilty. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more. There is, on occasions, kind of assumptions or unconscious bias or whatever it is. So how do you all make sure that as you're doing investigations and you're working perhaps to take someone's freedom away, to make sure that you are giving them, all of the benefit of the doubt or whatever it is that they deserve, but yet at the same time, not to the point where people get away with something that they're obviously doing.
Yes, and I think it comes down to relentless oversight, and that's part of my role and the role of my teammates is to make sure that every step that we take has a second or third set of eyes to make sure that we just don't go off the smallest hunch of suspicion. And just for the group, and many of you know this, but there's different classifications of not guilt, but probable cause. We hear that a lot. You don't have probable cause, but to stop a motor vehicle, you need articulable suspicion. So you're not going to make an arrest necessarily. You may issue a citation or issue a warning. Where you start to get into probable cause is when you've established enough factual information to say that it's tipped the scales to say you're at 80, 90, or 95% that the person accused probably committed that crime. Once that's established, it goes through other layers, of course, where the defendant will be eligible for a preliminary hearing, where the state will present the initial evidence, and if it's simply not there, that person is set free. They'll no cross the case or dismiss it. But what we do is we use the same technology that we've been talking about here is the body-worn cameras, the dash cameras. We have other tools and techniques from signal sidearm and things like that will activate automatically, but we follow the policies, and if it's not there, like the chief said, that's someone's freedom, that's their liberty. And we kind of take it for granted, like, well, lock them up, throw them in jail. I don't want to spend 3 hours in jail, let alone 30 days or 30 years. And it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow because the cases I work, an individual may get 30 years in prison because of the good police work that brought facts together. But it's kind of a sour feeling because this person loses their freedom for 30 years, and on the other side of that coin, somebody probably lost their life. So you have two huge families that have lost somebody, one to the act of violence, one because of the act that they committed. And that's probably the most serious thing that we deal with. We know the what and the how. The question is always the why. And that's what drives us not only in the profession, but we know the mechanics. We know how to get from point A to point B. But why are you in the business? Where's your heart? And we talk about a servant's heart. It's more than locking people up. It's making those meaningful relationships that when the worst does come, people know that we're authentic and they can come to us. And I want to be known as Tim. I don't want to be a captain or whoever it is. I want them to pick up the phone and say, Tim, this is what's on my mind. You got what did wrong, or this is the information I have. So I know that's a long-winded answer to your question, but there's so many steps where you can stop that train from derailing, and you need to say, okay, the ends don't justify the means. And if somebody didn't commit a crime or you're not certain about it, although it's difficult to tell a victim, you don't make the charge. It's much, much too serious. You can't do it.
And we'll talk more about victims here in a few minutes, but Yvonne, I want to go to you because, everything they describe is, the idea of the law being colorblind. But sometimes the law is not always colorblind, or at least historically it has not been. How in Greenville are you all working to make sure the law is colorblind in your communities?
Well, let me go back to Project Safe Neighborhoods. We actually started this, again, this is for Greenville City Police Department, but we started in one particular community. The reason why this particular community was so important is because an officer was shot and killed by a self-admitted gang member. And so, again, this is a violence reduction model. So when you talk about being colorblind, one of the pieces that we implemented was bringing in actually it's a program called Asset-Based Community Development. And with that, you come into that community and you actually discover all of the assets, whether or not it's residents who live there and what they do, or the service providers, and you actually identify that. And it was really important for some of our team, the sworn individuals, to come in there and find out this neighborhood that we knew as someone killed our comrade, our brother, it has so many other positive aspects. And it's important because, again, when they go into that neighborhood, they're thinking of what happened in that neighborhood. They're not seeing the county council individuals that live there, or the doctors, the lawyers, everything else that occurs. They're just seeing gang members. So it's important that we recognize that our experiences do frame how we see people, even though we want to be colorblind. I think we all should recognize that we see color. You know, yeah, we see color. You know, and I think that's really the first step, that we do recognize that we are different. But in short, so we worked hard in that area, in building up in that area of community and service providers, and saying this neighborhood, I'm just going to name it, of Nicholtown, is full of rich history. We took a tour of Nicholtown to see all of the wealth of resources and relationships that were in that area. And that helped because, again, this model says everyone in Nicholtown is not creating or committing crimes. It's usually, the data will show, it's a small percentage. So if we can focus on that small percentage of individuals that are picking up guns and committing violent acts, then we don't have to come in and police everything or stop everyone, or so the neighborhood begins to feel that you are really harassing us and you're just coming for us. As my kids say, stop coming for me. So in essence, that's what we're building foundation, recognizing the assets, helping sworn officers to remove that lens of just seeing where my brother was killed and seeing the richness. Because the wealth of our lives really can be measured in relationships anyway. People we're in relationship with, we listen to, we consult, we involve, and so that's the work. It's slow work, but that's the work that we're doing, so that we recognize, I thought I saw you this way, but you're not what I thought. You're more. You know, so if that answers your question.
No,
That's the work that we're
and
trying
I want to touch on a little bit of that in a minute, but I do want to go, Michelle, we want to talk to you a little bit about the data. How is that data tracked and then used by police departments to be able to, as she said, recognize, pinpoint areas where there might be more crime happening instead of, policing a larger area that where there isn't necessarily the same level of crime?
Right. Well, in terms of how data are collected, there are some things that are collected across departments, across areas, but in a lot of cases, it's really agency dependent, the level of detail or how much is put into that. When you have data to look at and you can look at what's happening within a jurisdiction, there are lots of things that you can do with it. We know commonly that there's a very small percentage of offenders commit the majority of crime, especially serious crime. And the same thing is true for geographical locations, addresses. So if you have, a lot of people have heard of hotspots. Now we look at micro hotspots. You may have a specific intersection, a specific address, a specific building in an apartment complex, where if you drill down and you look at what's happening, it may be that we have the impression that this apartment complex has a lot of problems. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's coming from a couple of people. You find those couple of people, you can stop a lot of what's going on in a very targeted way that's based on what is happening and not anything about an individual. Because we also know that a lot of crime that occurs has to do with the physical environment it's in. Sometimes more so than the actual individual people who are involved. There are some types of environments and locations that are criminogenic that encourage that. And if we can make adjustments to those environments, it can help. So there are a lot of ways that we can use data to look at places, at what's happening and when, If we have an agency like these who keep track of their data in a really holistic way, we can go through, either their analyst or someone at the center, can go through and look for patterns. We may find patterns of time of day, day of week. Those are all things that analysts watch for. So we are really just one of the supports behind the agency. You're not going to take away traditional policing tactics. You need all of those things. But if we can provide some more information to say, hey, you have limited resources and you don't want to go out into this neighborhood and just assume something about the whole neighborhood, we can help you figure out what's happening exactly where in a more specific way so that you can use your resources wisely, and also so you can make fair evidence-based decisions about police strategies for your agency.
So I can keep asking questions, but certainly, as we said, we want this to be interactive. So if anyone has questions as we're engaging, please feel free to do that. Yes.
You just mentioned criminal locations, and you can make adjustments to those to reduce them.
Yes. So when it comes down to it, you basically have three factors come together for there to be a crime, right? There has to be someone who's motivated to be an offender, right? There has to be some kind of target that's suitable. It might be a person, it might be a building, could be anything, right? And there has to be what we call a lack of capable guardianship. But basically, there is nobody watching, or there are bushes and you can't see it, or there's no alarm system, or there's no oversight, something like that. So if you take away any of those three components, there is no crime. So when we try to adjust the physical environment, that's what we look at. Each of those three has managers, has handlers. If you have an apartment complex, that apartment complex has managers there. And they are responsible for that physical location. So there's a lot you can do to the physical environment. And we actually are, I'm looking at my partner over there now, because we're actually planning for a public training on what we call crime prevention through environmental design. Anybody can use. You can use this in your home, you can use this in your workplace, anywhere. And it's basically looking at your physical environment and saying, what about my environment? It creates more of a risk that I can change. So this is used in all settings. Recently I was talking to someone in healthcare, and they were looking at their nurse's station and how it was situated and who could see what from which angle. Things about the physical environment can be changed. I'm working on a project with Devin right now at LISC, and we're looking at these exact things. Hey, there's a lot of brush in this area. This obscures what's happening there. If someone's walking by, they can't see. Let's clear it out, right? Where do we need more lighting? All of those types of things can really directly affect the chance that crime is going to occur in that area without even touching the part where you're looking at what people are involved or the circumstances of crimes themselves. So it's not everything, but it's a piece.
So it seems that, from that community safety, one element of community safety is community development, making sure you have communities that are safe, that people feel good being in. And in Spartanburg, most especially, there's been a lot of development, like the north side and other places. And I wonder, from the three of you, specifically in law enforcement, if you have examples of communities that you've worked with, or that your departments have worked with, where you have seen a reduction in crime because there's been community redevelopment and a focus on, maybe not specifically on community safety, but a focus on making that a nicer place for people to live, and then therefore it being safer is a result of that. Tim?
Sure, I can start off on that, and you're right. Probably about 5 years ago, there was a concentrated effort to address some of the issues in the north side, which is typically on Howard Street for those people who are familiar with Spartanburg. And it was a difficult neighborhood. There was a lot of apartment complexes and dilapidated homes that would cause people to visit that area that had ill intent. There was prostitution, there was drugs, there was violence. So what they did there is they created, with some financial backing, a Voyager program, which in essence was community members that had a vested interest in that community where they grew up, their children lived, that they had very, very strong ties to it. And the intent of this program was not to relocate people from their home and their community, but to speak to Michelle's point, is create an environment where there was home ownership, there was a mix of market rate versus some lower cost alternatives, where we could form that sense of community with everyone that wanted to live there, regardless of their financial viability. And the change has been astronomical. I started working that beat in 1997, and it was like a war zone. They would shoot across the street at each other, and now it's vibrant. And it's because not only the community partners, the nonprofit, the police, but I think what we're most proud of, and this is what's important, I think, as this discussion continues, is we push our folks, not just at the command staff level, but at the line level, to serve on these boards, these committees, these commissions. Maybe not to understand the minutia of the business and the construction, but to say, we're here, we're walking with you on this journey. We want to make sure that you have a direct connection to the police department. These are some of the things that we see. These are some of the heat maps that we kind of work and coordinate our efforts toward. And it's been huge. Where it was, that was our hot spot, if you will. It's down 80%. And it's growing. Other people are coming to visit our model from around the country to say, what have you done? But we also recognize the complexities of it and to make sure that people don't feel like they're being kicked out of their neighborhood. And it's a very difficult balance, and we understand that, and we appreciate that. And the model is growing, and we're trying to get people out of substandard housing to give them some place that they're proud of and can be safe and secure and not get screwed over by a bad landlord, to be honest with you.
So, Jim or Matt, any examples from your communities?
I would just add to everything that was said. And so our officers are divided up when you come into work every day. And I think a lot of people just don't know this. So you come into work, you come into roll call, and each officer has a certain area they patrol. Sometimes I think people think that officers just aimlessly rotate the city and answer calls every day. But, so they're responsible for a certain area. We divide ours up by council districts. And so each officer is in that district. We have zones 1 and 2. They back each other 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 zones, and then we have floaters. But saying that, and kind of like what you're talking about, we divide 2 of those problem areas down into beats. So when we're doing our incident reports or record management systems, they are listing that every time they take a report. So you have this huge zone, which could be like this area of Greenville, but one officer is just working in that little small beat to keep in that area. Saying all that, and then picking up like from Spartanburg, one of the big things we've done, we started early on in this, and I know all our agencies are doing this, is Anderson, Greenville, Spartanburg County is a high-intensity drug trafficking court, and it's labeled that by the DEA. So we have a full-time DEA task force officer. He stays in Greenville most of the day. We don't see him that much. But the benefit we have on that is it gives us access to Anderson, Oconee, Pickens, Greenville, Spartanburg, and Cherokee County through that, our full-time DEA task force officer. So we have one DA, a part-time ATF, U.S. Marshal Service, and our last one we just got was last year's U.S. Secret Service task force officer. Our highest crimes right now, our violent crimes are down, sexual assaults are up, white collar crime is up, and aggravated assaults are up. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. But a lot of these task forces have been instrumental in our partnership with the feds. I'm not saying anything bad about our solicitor, but it's a lot easier to partner with the feds and getting what they call truth in sentencing and someone in court with a federal judge. I think that partnership goes a long way.
Anything, Matt?
Yeah, sure. There's one example that I'd like to share, and it's been a long-term effort. It's not something that happened overnight, but
I'm fortunate enough to have one of our council members, Mr. Booker, here today, so he'll know exactly what I'm referring to, but we have a neighborhood or a community called Needmore. It's in our close to our downtown area. It's an area that was probably, most of the houses were built probably in the 1950s, somewhere in there, maybe 60s, and it's a very diverse neighborhood, and most of the, historically, there is a very significant African American citizen base there, but there are a lot of people who live in that neighborhood who have been there forever, and they absolutely take pride in their neighborhood. But going back towards the beginning of my career, that was a very high crime area. We had a mixture of the homeowners who've lived for generations in that neighborhood, and then we also have an apartment complex that it kind of sits right in the middle of it. That's has a lot of Section 8 residents who live there. So a lot of those people were in and out, in and out, in and out. They did not have that same level of pride in that neighborhood that the other residents had. But we have some very strong leaders who live in that neighborhood, and over time they have made significant effort in getting improvements to the neighborhood, such as street paving, curb and gutter work. They've got grants through the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority to have a lot of structural improvements to a lot of the homes there. So that neighborhood has stood up against the bad elements who were causing havoc in their neighborhood over the years. And it's been a long, long struggle, but I'm pleased to say that's actually one of the safest neighborhoods in our city these days. But it's been a partnership with those leaders in the community who weren't going to tolerate living in that environment without some interaction with the police department. They've partnered with us. I mean, during my whole career, we've been working with them and continue to do that. But that is a community filled with some great, great people who really do care about their neighborhood. And but they've been very open to work with us. They've held us accountable as a police department, and they absolutely will let us know when they're not happy with someone who's moved in and causing all kind of problems, having parties out in their yard, burning stuff in a barrel, and blasting music, selling drugs. We've had violent crime over the years there, but all that stuff, the environment there is so much better than it's ever been. And a lot of those original residents, back at the beginning, they're still there, and they're seem to be very happy and pleased. But it's been a struggle, and it's been worth it. So that's a great example, is the Needmore community.
Great. So, Yvonne, you said you've been in your role for 14 years, and in the community work there. How have you and the city and the police department been able to play a role in the community development beyond just the safety element within the neighborhoods that you support?
The neighborhood, again, that we're focusing on sounds very much like the neighborhood you just described, because they have a very strong neighborhood association. They are connected. They go to every city council meeting. These are folks who have been there for a while. Their voice is strong, even with individuals moving in, because this particular neighborhood there's a lot of gentrification coming in, so there are those that have been there forever. There are those that are moving in, but yet the neighborhood association is still welcoming. And then there's low-income housing, which sometimes has kind of a higher crime rate going on. But in short, it's because of the strength of that community voice that the police department is standing shoulder to shoulder with them. If I can just throw in the reason why I like this particular model, Project Safe Neighborhoods, is because I call it the U-turn model. Because once the data says this individual's committing a lot of violent acts, If you can all, I love an illustration, so if you can imagine, I'm driving a car, I'm flying, but I'm headed the wrong way. And so I'm going to either harm myself or someone else. So all of a sudden, blue lights are behind me, you know, okay? And they pull me over. And the spotlight is on me, and they're saying, you're breaking the law. They don't know why I'm breaking the law. It could be because I just did something, I'm running from someone. It could be because I just didn't read the sign. It could be that I'm impaired. They're not quite sure of the reason, but the point is they stopped me. At that point in time, they advised me, and this is a little different than what you may do, but they're saying you gotta make a U-turn, okay? You have to do something differently. In order for me to make that U-turn, of course, we're gonna have to look at why I was going the wrong way in the first place. But Project Safe Neighborhoods allows people to make a U-turn because we will then connect them with the community voice. It might be a voice of pain that says, I lost someone to this very same thing. Stop what you're doing. It could be the ministers, the moral voice saying, we love you, but we're not gonna have this here. Or it could be someone else, a returning citizen that says, yeah, I did that once, went away for 10 years, but I know you can make a U-turn. And then we connect them with service providers, very much like Ms. Tiffany. I'm glad to see you got to talk afterwards, then to help them make that U-turn. So all of the pieces are so important for them to be in place. Law enforcement standing shoulder to shoulder with the residents, standing shoulder to shoulder with service providers to help those that need to make a U-turn, make that U-turn. And if you don't, then there is the federal level, because charges will be pursued at that particular level. No joke, we're letting you know, but we want you safe, alive, and free from the criminal justice system, that you also will get help if you so choose to take advantage of that. So that all ties in to community development and the lifting up of that community.
Right. Well, and it also gets into what we talked about that came out of the Safer Upstate, which is valuing all lives within a community. So, questions? Yeah, Joe?
So what actions do you have in place for reentry? Like somebody's been incarcerated, they're out in the community now, they're having a really difficult time finding a job, they may be full of anger and all kinds of other issues. They may want to return back into that neighborhood. So what do you do, or do you do, to help them re-enter into the community?
I can answer that if, okay. Greenville has a Greenville Reentry Coalition, which actually, they not only meet with some individuals before they return to Greenville, but every month they have a resource fair. You're gonna need ID because they're released usually without any ID. There's a job, so there are what we call second chance employers that will come and hire these individuals. There's counseling available. They even tie in again to different counseling. So in short, Greenville does have it's called the Greenville Reentry Coalition. And so they're forming together to really assist individuals because we have a high rate of individuals coming back to work. So
I think we have a question down here.
So a portion of my role is business, corporate recruiting, things like that. And when a corporation is looking to relocate, and they'll down to 2 to 3 different areas, one of the things that I'll do a quick Google search is crime data. How can someone educate them using that information? You know, it may not be the most accurate, and they may pass up these areas based off that crime information that they're receiving. Hey, go to anybody.
Those websites are the bane of my existence.
That's right.
Oh gosh, they don't tell you what you need to know. And I have worked with individual law enforcement agencies who have said, I won't name them, one of them's here, who have said, look, here is, when somebody goes online and says, hey, is this a safe place? Do I want to move here? Here's what they see. And it is never an accurate picture. It's just not, it is not that simple. If you go on and look at the FBI's data each year, you have this box that comes up that says, hey, you can't compare areas, it's not that simple. You have to click past that to get to anything. Nobody reads it. They click and they go to the stuff anyway. So some specific things that I have seen that really make those websites inaccurate are things like you're looking at a city PD, but there is a lot of county population right at the line. People are coming back and forth, right? And so if you're looking at the rate of a particular type of crime compared to the population of the city, that's not accurate. That agency is actually serving way more people than that. Another one can be the jurisdiction itself. So Greer, for example, when I think of the city of Greer, I'm thinking, oh, the city of Greer. That's not what it looks like. It is, I mean, they have everything around BMW, around GSP. It's not just what we think of as the city of Greer. The jurisdiction is much different if you look at the shape of it. And so none of those things ever go into those websites. So this is one reason that we created the Crime Analysis Center, to serve both law enforcement and the public. No other crime analysis center does that, but there's a need for the public to have a better understanding. People who want to understand how this works, how decisions are made, what are the problems with the data. They need resources. They need an outlet for that. That's not, I'm going to go ahead and name it. That's not Neighborhood Scout, or one of those similar websites. If you have questions about a jurisdiction in the upstate, ask us and we can frame it more fully.
Well, when I lived in Orlando, Orlando was always listed as one of the highest crime areas in the country. Well, they get 50 million visitors a year. And so a good number of the crimes are committed around that, but they look at local population and say, well, based on your population, your crime rate is high. So,
yes, I did my PhD in Orlando with Orlando PD's data, and you cannot compare. This is a good example when you go on the FBI records. It's publicly accessible, but if you don't know what you're doing, you are not going to get an accurate picture of what you're looking for. I mean, Orlando, and then if you look at the city, some of the parts are in the city, some are in the county. If you don't take all that into account, you're not going to get the answer you need.
Well, and it's very similar when we talk about the state of South Carolina as it relates to schools. We rate fairly low nationally as a state, but if you take our 10 counties of the upstate out of it and just made us our own state, we'd rank in the top quarter. So, statistics, I mean, I'm a sports stat guy. I can argue the same thing to tell you what's good and what's bad with the same exact number. And I'm sure it's very similar. So we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we get any questions or concerns you have. Yeah, Jackie.
I just had one, and it kind of relates to everyone, but with your new program at USC Upstate, and also with the police officers, the police stations, and recruitment, because I didn't know maybe that is bringing more students to your area, because I know at Tri-County, our criminal justice program has declined because a lot of people aren't interested anymore. So I was just wondering, how is recruitment with your population as well as with the police officers? Because we've talked about recruitment before and having people that are even interested, and how in the past you've had like tons of applications and now you don't have all those applications anymore.
Right. Well, I would say we still have a healthy criminal justice major, but across not just our university, but overall in general, just population trends and all that, enrollment is down. The crime analysis program that we have now has been very helpful for us because our criminal justice majors can add that on. So if they are coming and they're going to go work at one of these agencies, even if they're not going to be an analyst, they may be on patrol, but they understand how to think strategically about what's happening around them. So that is still fairly new, but that's starting to help with us on the end of providing recruits for the agencies who are more informed and more in tune with modern policing and what we know now, and taking advantage of what we know now. But I'll let everybody else speak on how difficult recruiting is.
I think we missed an opportunity, and I hope you don't cut my tires, but the criminal justice degree is good. It teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about the historical nature of law enforcement. That's a good background to have, but we're seeking out people with degrees in finance, accounting, computer science. It's not, that brings more value to our organization because the way that the law enforcement has evolved, any degree is fine. But one of the pitfalls, one of the challenges we have is even to be eligible to be a law enforcement officer in the state of South Carolina, you have to be 21. In the detention facility, they passed a new law where you can begin at 18. I don't think we need 18-year-old men and women out there driving around cars with guns. But in a controlled environment, when you're not armed and you're directly supervised, I can see that's a good career path. So when you have these schools like the vocational schools at the Extension of High School, that's all well and good, but we lose them in that 3-year gap. So trying to channel them and marry that educational experience where you said, all right, I made the investment in my education. It may not be in criminal justice, but I was an education major. I was a business major. And then we want to marry that with a life experience. Because for some of us, this is their first big kid job. And they haven't had that type of structure and they really don't know what they're walking into. So we encourage, and we do a lot of this, and I know other agencies do as well. We do internships, we do ride-alongs, we put them through the Explorer program to say, if you're going to make an investment and you can make the cut to become a law enforcement officer, is this what you want to do? And we had 2 interviews in my agency this week with potential hires, and one of the applicants, they weren't really sure. And we're not willing to make that large investment if they don't know what they're walking into. And that's, hopefully that answered it, but it's tougher business. I think if I knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't get into law enforcement. I don't want either of my 2 children to get into this business because it scares me to death. I have a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old, and if they said, Dad, I want to be a cop, I'm like, yeesh, talk to your mom. I'm not a
I want to ask you, because you were very candid when we had our discovery committee. I remember being on one of the calls with you, and you said that you have your department does not have enough non-white male officers.
Yes, absolutely.
But at the same time, you said, a big reason for that is because they just aren't there. So how do we, create, an environment that we want, anyone, but most especially, African American or Hispanic or women, or other minorities, to get into law enforcement with the idea that people who you want to have a wide array of cultures within your department because your communities have a wide array of cultures.
I truly do believe that, and I didn't come up with this, okay, but I've learned it and I truly believe in it, that your law enforcement agency should somewhat, the goal would be to reflect the diversity of your community. So my community in Greer we have about a 15% African American population and about 16% Hispanic, less than 2 or 3% Asian or other, and the rest is white. So, but we do, that's 30%, more than 30% who in our city who are some type of minority. So we're not even close to that in our police department, and I don't hide that. That's not a secret. It is absolutely one of my focal priorities as a police chief to try to change that. We have had numerous African Americans over the years work at our agency, but these days people move around, they leave, they'll get out of the profession or they'll change agencies. We've hired a few that just didn't make it, and it has nothing to do with what race they are. It's the fact that everybody, it's a struggle to, no matter what race or anything you are, but it's a tough career. Now, 2015, if you look back, that was sort of like a mark in time where everything sort of changed. That was Ferguson, Missouri. Okay, and then there was a series of bad events that occurred, Baltimore, Maryland, New York City, North Charleston, South Carolina. The list goes on and on. There was sort of a series of bad events that involved law enforcement. George Floyd obviously was one of probably the worst that we've ever seen. And that, to me, seemed like a very definite point in time where the applications just went down tremendously, all across the board. Not just one minority or white people. Everybody has stopped applying. So if we had we usually run applicant pools because we run them through all these processes together. So we used to have a pool that would be 65, 70 people if you had 1 or 2 openings. And now, I think this last pool we had 14 people. And then, let me give you an example. Here's another challenge. The first 2 steps that you have to do at our agency if you apply is to take a written exam and a physical agility course. Well, out of the 14, I can promise you about 9 will show up. The rest won't even reply to your emails, phone calls. They just vanish. They just ghost us, So the 9 will show up, 2 or 3 or 4 may fail those tests. So we're only left with a handful that will start with the interview process after that. And then we'll flush out maybe 4/5 of those. So we'll be left with maybe 1, maybe 2. Yeah, really good applicant pool, we might get 3. So, that's the struggles that we are facing right now. Recruiting and hiring and retention adds to the recruiting problem. But, that is front and center all the time. All of the seminars that all of us police people go to, probably more of the topics than anything are recruiting and retention. That seems to be what we do now,
And I want to mention to that, Robert, right? We were joking. He's in Fountain Inn, and our GP McClure, who works for us, is the mayor there, and he's joking that they finally are giving them minimum wage. I know it's more than that, but the point is, and I remember, Jackie, when we had the sessions last year at Tri-County, that was a big topic of discussion. You can go to QT and be an assistant manager and make more money than you can as a law enforcement officer, and generally QT is a little safer than the work you guys do. So how do we create, we've talked for most of this time about kind of the value add that safe communities and law enforcement and everything brings to the community, but, and I'm sorry that Councilman Booker has left, because I'd love to put him on the spot, but for our elected leaders and others, how do we get them understanding that supporting you all, financially as well as other benefits is a retention and attraction component for law enforcement? Because, and Michelle, maybe you have these numbers, but law enforcement is pretty low on the pay scale. I mean, teachers have passed them, and some others. I'm not sure about nurses and healthcare, but I mean, it's pretty low given compared to the importance of what the jobs are.
Yes, it's extremely low, and if I think I'm going to have someone who is going to be the person who comes if I need help, and I'm going to expect them to have top-notch training, to understand empathy, to understand how communities work, how social situations work. And then I go to Chief Hamby and he has a position and he's whittled down to maybe 1 or 2 choices. That doesn't make sense, and I think it's ridiculous for us to think that money's not a part of that. If you run a business and you want to get the best of the best in that position, and someone who's really effective and driven and knows what they're doing, you're not going to offer them minimum wage. And when you're looking at the only profession that can take someone's liberty, it makes no sense.
Dean.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm a diversity officer, and there are a couple of things that are just standard for me, and that is this concept of relationships driving results. this sounds like the kind of conversations that we are having in healthcare about recruitment. It's true, I believe, that the incident of George Floyd and the pandemic forced our country to have these kinds of tough conversations across sectors. So I think there needs to be kind of three things going on at the same time. There clearly was a move from elected officials to address the pay scale for teachers. That had to happen. I think that the conversation around the importance of the importance of education as a profession, that conversation had to be elevated, and I think that they needed to identify opportunities to engage people who may be interested in responding to the calling of education. That's the same thing in healthcare, and I believe that that's the same thing in law enforcement. I look at what you all do as more of a calling. I mean, there's something that makes you want to lay down your life for others, whether it's all good reasons or not. But somehow we have to tap into that. I think there has to be a long-term strategy. Start as we do with Chief Stewart does an amazing job. I'm just in awe of the work that they do in Anderson. He and Councilwoman Thompson have actually put that topic on their shoulders, and they've made sure that everybody understands what their role is. So there has to be a way to engage young people further upstream. Find those people who have the potential for the calling. Now, you can't go out and protect the community if all you're doing is running explorer programs, but that has to be key. Expose individuals to the environment, and then also tap into individuals who have those other professions that you were talking about. You can, what is the saying, you can teach for, you can hire for talent and train for skill. So I think that's the key. If other people can be law enforcement officers other than the folks who start out that way, tap into those as well. But I think it's going to take all hands on deck to address this, because we have got to have engaged, prepared law enforcement officers, and as I say to our providers who may not be representatives of underrepresented populations, you don't get a pass because you're white. So you have to be able to connect with all of the populations that you're responsible for protecting. A lot that has to be done, but it all has to be done at the same time, I think.
Well, and as always happens with these sessions, we are at time, so I'm going to wrap up. But first, I want to thank our panelists, and we could go on for another hour. I mean, this is great conversation. We will certainly continue this through our work, and that leads me to plug Justine. Stand up. Justine is leading. One of the things we're doing with at the top is, you know, we have historically been very. Stand up.
Okay. That was just for a second.
With a lot of our work been very broad, but not necessarily gone deep with certain subjects, and so we have committed through our board the focus of maybe not having 8 or 9 initiative areas, but focusing on 4 or 5. We have 3 that we have already said we're going to move forward on, and we're looking for 1 or 2 more. And so what we're doing is we're taking all the initiatives areas that we have worked on and having sessions around those to talk about what could be the next issues and next steps. And we will be having one around the Safer Upstate initiative within the next few weeks. Do we have a date for that one, Justine?
No, end of April, I believe we're looking at for that.
And so Justine is leading. I had her stand, and I should have had Mark stand too, because he's our vice chair for initiatives. But Mark, I'm nice to you today. They are leading that effort for us, so I would encourage all of you, and Juana, you kind of, really set out a couple of things that are potential topics. When we set that date, I would encourage all of you to come and be part of that discussion. Hope these folks, especially the ones who have been engaged before, Chief Stewart and Chief Hamby, but all of you are invited to be part of that discussion as we look at what our next things around safety in our communities. And I think what we've heard today from our topic leaders, and we all know, is that this is a hard area, and it's ever changing. We talk about, we just talked about the importance of having people in your, departments who reflect your communities. Well, the recent incident in Memphis, the death of a black person, most of the police officers there were black. So there isn't just one answer, it really is a big picture and a lot of components. But what I am very proud of in the 3 years that we've been learning and kind of unpeeling the onion is here in the Upstate, we have some amazing professionals, whether they be law enforcement like the three men here, or community folks like the two ladies who engage in this field, and many of you as well, who really care about this work and about their profession and are doing everything they can under the spotlight. We talked about websites and things. We also have the national media that likes to, blare their horn. And most of what we hear from the national media when it comes to community safety and law enforcement is nothing like what we've heard said today. We don't hear these stories very often. And so I think it's really important that we continue to have these discussions, and as community members to put not just our law enforcement officers, but also our elected officials and our community leaders, I don't want to say to the feet to the fire, because doesn't sound nice, but hold them accountable that they do all play a role in making sure that we have all the ingredients we need to have safe communities. So this is certainly a topic that it has always been there, but I think, and Chief Hamby, you did a good job kind of giving some of the historical reasons, maybe in a negative way, why that has reduced the number of people who want to be law enforcement officers, but on the other hand, it has elevated the magnification of the profession over the last 6 or 7 years. And so I would encourage all of you, I thank all of you for taking the time to be with us today. Please continue to be engaged. I again want to thank our panelists for being part of this. Our next session next month is going to be at Tri-County Tech in Pendleton, and our topic, interestingly enough, Juana, is education and the role of teachers and workforce and the like. So would welcome you all join us in Pendleton next month, and then we'll be talking about Jewett. We're going to talk about the movie industry and that piece the Urban League has really been focusing on in May. We're doing a field trip for that session. So be on the lookout, and Justine, who is continuing to stand. So, so I hope you have a great weekend, and again, thank you all for being with us today.